From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan, alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianca. What's going on today, Lou? What do we got on tap?
How are you, partner? Matt, you ever get that impression the more things change, the more they stay the same? In this hyper-evolved, technologically inclined economic environment, we're still relying upon raw metals. It's the natural resources that dictate our economy, right? So it would be nice to have just a state of affairs of what's going on with natural resources and raw metals, because Lord knows we need them in every electric vehicle, every technical component, every smartphone, every gadget in the house. And no better person to walk us through that maze than the master of metals, Taso Arima, co-founder, CEO of IperionX. You got big shoes to fill there, Taso. Welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate that. That is some very big shoes to fill, master of metals. It's like masters of the universe, which I used to watch when I was young.
Taso, where do we begin? You need precious metals basically in every appliance, every smartphone, every vehicle today. Give us the 30,000-foot view. What's the present day status of natural resources on the planet?
Yeah, present day status is pretty complex, but also in an interesting situation. So over the last 20 years, you've had a big boom in outside of the Western world in China. I remember it was called the BRIC economies back in the day, but really it's really been focused a lot in China, what's happening there. And you've had a build-up of capacity and development of not just extraction, but really refinement of the key critical metals that we use today. And so you've got places in the world, depending on what natural resources you're looking at, whether it's nickel, whether it's lithium, whether it's rare earths, whether it's titanium, where you have the extraction of these minerals coming out of the ground. But over the last 20 years, you've seen a common thematic be that, all these minerals tend to flow through one supply chain, and that supply chain typically goes through China to be manufactured into end products, to be manufactured into something that then an Apple or a Ford or a GM or somebody like that can buy, or a Tesla can buy to make into their products. And so you've got a world where, it's in a precarious situation and the world's woken up to supply chains since COVID. I don't think anybody knew what a supply chain was before COVID happened. I knew because I've been in material supply chains all my life, but the world woke up and said, well, where does this stuff actually come from? Because we don't get it anymore. Remember toilet paper? People were like, well, I don't know, toilet paper. Well, sometimes, it comes from different places. Or chips, with cars, the microchips of the cars. And so the world's woken up to the fact that, stuff comes from somewhere, a supply chain comes from somewhere. And I think they've realized, oh no, this supply chain is going increasingly through other countries. And there's been now work and investment and a focus on how do we decouple from that? How do we bring it back? Or how do we at least decouple from the China thematic? And how do we bring it back home?
Taso, is that a Canadian accent, I sense?
It's an Australian accent. You're up in Western Australia.
So Taso, give us your background story a little bit, the origin story, right?
The origin story, yeah. Okay, it's like, yeah. So for me, I was born in Greece, so I've got a Greek background. And then I grew up in Western Australia. Western Australia, very focused on minerals, especially iron ore. Today, a lot of lithium minerals come from there, oil and gas. I came from, pretty modest household. My father was a painter, and then I moved straight into engineering school. And then I dropped out of engineering school to start working on the merchant banking side of the business when the China boom just started happening in the early 2000s. It never looked back since, but did use the skills or my interest in engineering and materials to help build companies. So I worked in the merchant banking space for only about a year before I started my first company, which was in the coal space. I developed a very large coal asset when I was 23 years old. I founded it, I was funded into it, sold out of it in 2011 when I was 27 years old. And then I stayed in the minerals space, moved to the US in 2015, started a company called Piedmont Lithium, NASDAQ listed PLL, in 2016, really focusing on what materials do we want for our future industries. Could see that energy storage and electric vehicles was going to be big. So got really interested in how I could insert myself as a piece into that and build supply chains for that industry. Lithium was still, people didn't know what lithium was back then. People thought I was crazy actually starting a company in North Carolina to extract lithium. But started that, built that, great team again. A lot is about the team. I've been really lucky to have a great team. And, created what is a, large billion-dollar company, which, 2 weeks ago or a week ago received $141 million from the Department of Energy to continue to scale up.
Good for you.
So, yeah, really interesting. Really good. Being focused all the time on my minerals and metals space of the world.
So Taso, you brought PLL public, right? Piedmont Lithium, or was it public when you were over there already?
So PLL was we started it publicly in Australia, so that's where we started it.
Okay.
And then we listed it in the US through just a registration, just through
okay.
Not an IPO. And then we did essentially an IPO. We did our first F1, our first offering in 2021. Actually, we signed a deal before we signed a deal with Tesla. We did an offering. And then we did maybe a few follow-on offerings after that while I was still on the board.
So what's more difficult, extracting materials out of the ground or dealing with investment bankers trying to get money raised and get a deal done?
Tough one, right?
You're both just as thick.
Yeah, both pretty tough. If you've got good people, dealing with operations and stuff is straightforward. If you've got good people, there's always challenges. But investment bankers, always pain. But no, it is both its own different animal, right? I think dealing with people, dealing with operations is executing on what you want to do, and that has its own challenges. But then once you've executed on what you do, dealing with the bankers, investors, everything like that is more about how do you take what you've just executed on and communicate it to the world in a way where people can understand it and can want to get excited about investing in your particular process or business that you're executing on. So two sort of different things. I try to bridge the two as in my position.
Taso, for you on this podcast 150 years ago, we'd be talking about coal and iron. If you were on this podcast in 10 years, what raw materials would we be talking about?
In 10 years' time, what we're doing now around titanium metal is, I think, what people will be really talking about in 10 years' time. You're right, 150 years ago, we probably would have been talking either aluminum or steel. And I see the same similarities in what we're doing in titanium. Back 150 years ago, steel and aluminum was only just starting. We had only just invented processes which could lower the cost of steel, lower the cost of aluminum, and start expanding it. Steel into rails, aluminum into aerospace back then, and into some components. But in 10 years' time, I think we need to focus on materials which continue to improve the products that we are using today, make them more durable, make them more recyclable. We need to focus on strong materials, lightweight materials for energy efficiency across automotive and aerospace, drones, and space. And so I think we will be talking about, in my case, in titanium or other materials like that, advanced materials.
Taso, this planet is immense. It's a huge planet, but it's finite. is there any fear that we would run out of titanium in the next 50 to 100 years? Or is our reserve so plentiful that we could just keep on drilling?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that we need to maximize the resources that we have. Resource utilization we need to max that out as much as we can, and that is recycling. In the titanium industry, you have a lot of scrap generation during the manufacturing of titanium part. We need to reduce that. We need to be able to recycle that scrap generation. We need to make everything as circular as we can. So, you hand a phone back in, you need to take all that phone apart, recycle the rare earth elements, recycle the housing and all that. Hopefully that's titanium in the future, and recycle that back into new products that we have, so that we can minimize the amount of resources that we take in the ground. But we will need to continue to take some resources out of the ground as we expand with, say, lithium and with titanium. There is enough there, but we shouldn't take it for granted. We should establish supply chains which can efficiently and sustainably extract those minerals, but then efficiently and sustainably create circular supply chains of those end metals and materials.
Where is most of the titanium mined in this country, in the world overall?
So there's quite a few countries which have titanium in particular. You have it across. There's quite a bit coming out of China that goes into its own industry. But then you have Australia, where I'm from, Western Australia, has some large mines, but Australia in general has some large operations. South Africa, you've got some refining operations and some of the what they call hard rock mining operations in Canada and in Norway. So fairly spread out across the world, but definitely centered a lot of extraction centered around China today.
So you showed us earlier a piece of a watch that you have a joint venture with Panerai with. Let's talk a little bit about this, because I think when most people think of titanium, we're thinking about airplanes, right? We're not thinking about watches.
Watches or anything. The titanium supply chain has been really expensive, and so it's been used in premium applications in before titanium has, but the major market has been aerospace and defense and medical, where cost is a non-issue and the benefits of titanium outweigh the cost. But if you could bring that cost down and make that product a sustainable product, then you've got a lot more applications. Like Panerai has used titanium metal in the past, so we're just helping to make their supply chain more sustainable by printing these watches. We make it more sustainable as well, not just carbon free, but this, you can imagine, you take that, you then machine it and polish it, and you make a watch. You lose hardly any of it. What they used to take in was a block and have to machine a block of titanium out, and you would lose to scrap, 70% of that little block to make a watch. So, we make it a more sustainable, fully recyclable supply chain. And if we can make it cheaper, then there's a lot of other products which you can.
So how did that joint venture come up with that? Did you just say, listen, I really like your watches. Do you want to do something? How did it come about? I'm interested in
pretty much like that. Actually, it was a discussion, me and my chairman, we were throwing around some ideas. I like my watches. IWC I like, which is another division of Richemont, which is the parent company of Panerai, and they have Cartier and stuff like that. And we're targeting the auto sector, we're targeting the smartwatch, smartphone sector, but we also were thinking, well, it would be cool to get a recycled watch, use our titanium, get some scrap, and make 100% recycled titanium metal watch for these luxury brands. And we were able to get into the chairman of Richemont, and from there get introduced to the right teams in Panerai, and the Panerai CEO really liked the concept, and the team liked the concept, and so we essentially went through a process of working with them, and eventually got that partnership going. So it's been great. They love the sustainability of it. That's really what they're focused on. But there's other customers like that who love the sustainability, but also love the opportunity to use more titanium metal if we make it cheaper, and expand its role across a lot more industries.
Taso, what is the advantage of titanium? Is it its pliability? Is its durability? What are the checkpoints for using titanium?
The big checkpoints for titanium are high strength to weight ratio and durability, corrosion resistance. So there's a a few other ones around, how it's electrical resistivity and it's heat resistance and its expansion coefficient and all that. But from a very high standpoint, it's very strong, especially titanium alloys. We make Ti64 typically, which is, our Ti64 clocks in at around 1100 megapascals, which compared to, say, stainless steel, 400 megapascals, or aluminum under 200 megapascals. So it's far stronger. But compared to, say, stainless steel, titanium metal, Ti64 is 45% lighter. So you can imagine it's almost three times the strength with half the weight. That's crazy. And then on top of that, the titanium metal is far more corrosion resistant. The Dr. Fong, who we work with closely, who invented the process that we use, he gives an example, great example, I really love it, of the corrosion resistance, which is attributable to its durability of titanium. If you put crude steel in seawater, you would have that crude steel will corrode in, say, a few months. If you put stainless steel in seawater, that will corrode in, say, 5 or so years. You put titanium metal in seawater, they have no data for when it corrodes. It doesn't corrode. So it's ultimate corrosion resistance, durability, strong, and lightweight. So you can imagine electric vehicles, for instance. We use stainless steel. You've probably all seen the cells that Tesla uses. That steel that encapsulates that cell is stainless steel. It's strong, light, it's corrosion resistant. But imagine if you can make titanium metal cheap enough where you use titanium metal instead. It's going to be more corrosion resistant, going to last longer, but it's going to be 45% of the weight, significantly reduce the weight of an electric vehicle, allowing it to go further. So there's a lot of applications where if you could bring down the cost, you could expand the role of titanium metal. So
Taso, today the current applications, like you explained, are obvious. There's some aerospace, there's some vehicular, obviously the world of luxury. In the future, as you further refine the processes, where is the future of titanium? Will we see a titanium refrigerator?
That's a good question. You could see some high-end products and eventually see it in applications like that. Today, you don't see it as much in luxury applications, in consumer good applications like smartwatches and smartphones, only in the premium models, and you don't see it a lot in auto. You see it in aerospace and defense because they can pay for the benefits. So for us, it's all of a sudden, let's see it more in auto. Let's see it expanded through not just being in a Bugatti brake caliper system. Let's see it in your average, F-150 or a GM Escalade or something like that. Potentially also in a Toyota Corolla in the future if we can bring the cost down enough. Let's see it in our smartwatches and smartphones where it's a more sustainable metal to use than aluminum, for instance, or stainless steel. Let's see it in those applications. But then do we see it in, I live on the beach just in North Miami Beach, and I have already corrosion on the outside door handles of my apartment. And it's only 4 years old, because of the wind. If that was titanium, it would never corrode. So, you can see it eventually in those architectural applications as well. So absolutely, I would want to sit here in 10 years time and people to go, well, of course, my smartwatch or my phone or something is made out of titanium metal. Whereas today people are like, really? Can it be done? In 10 years time, I think we hope that it just becomes sort of like the iPhone was. Well, of course you're going to have a smartphone. Well, of course that product is going to be made out of titanium metal.
Taso, one of your great success stories is being able to repurpose this titanium. I mean, how do you even procure that? Do you have a colonel from Cape Canaveral call you and say, hey, look, I've got this old space shuttle, come pick it up and put the titanium out? I mean, where do you get old titanium to repurpose?
That's another story of trying and going to find submarines and aircraft where we can get specific components that we can make into, say, luxury goods that people will pay a premium for. Imagine if we could get the Blackbird, right, the SR-71, and recycle the Blackbird into a watch. People will pay a lot of money for that. But we don't get what's called end-of-life scrap. Just quite frankly, because there's not much end-of-life scrap in titanium because it's so durable. It's hardly ever, you hardly ever, have an end-of-life scrap come back into the system. What we get though is titanium, and the titanium supply chain is unique in that there's a significant amount of scrap generation between when you have the metal to having a titanium metal part. You can lose, there's something called the buy-to-fly ratio. It can be higher than 10 to 1, where you buy 10 tons of metal to create 1 ton of part. And so all that, the rest of it is scrap. And so it's that scrap in the supply chain of creating titanium metal parts where we're recycling today. That's all of our feedstock, our raw material supply for our process is that scrap, making it into products. So repurposing it, not selling it or landfilling it, not selling it to the steel industry or landfilling it, repurposing it into a high quality titanium metal product. And that's what you see a lot of these groups, working on. Like I think Nike's working on repurposing shoes that came from ocean plastic scrap, things like that. Repurposing this scrap into products that we can use.
So how are you guys doing that? Are you utilizing 3D technology to build these out, and the advances there made this possible?
So yes, we use 3D printing. So once we take in the scrap, we create titanium metal spherical powders that we can print. We don't exactly need to use 3D printing. We just see it as a manufacturing modality, as we call it. That's really interesting for us because in and of itself, it's a sustainable source. But say if we wanted to make a flat bar or a plate or something, we could just press and sinter a plate with our powders into a titanium metal plate. But today, because we work with customers who are at the cutting edge, who want to be at the cutting edge, they want to use additive manufacturing in general, and it is, as it's growing, the cost of additive manufacturing is coming down. Introduce a cheap raw material feedstock for that additive manufacturing, our titanium metal powders. You can create parts and components for customers that are cheap, that are fully sustainable and fully recyclable as well. So we do work a lot with 3D printing because of that.
So do you see the next frontier, and probably one of the biggest markets that's growing right now, is space exploration, a big place where titanium is currently used and going to get even bigger over the next several years?
Yeah, I think space exploration is I'm really interested in it. I really like it. As you can see from some of my arts that I've bought, that's actually on the back of it. I wanted it to be on a aluminum piece of metal, but it's a titanium piece of metal, but it's on an aluminum piece of metal. I'll ask the artist when I see him later this month to do it on titanium. But space is a very exciting part of where titanium metal could go, and eventually building stuff in space and in other. When we start going to other planets, building stuff in other planets, and that's where 3D printing and what we produce, the titanium metal powder, makes a lot of sense. You actually remove a lot of issues that you have on Earth up in space in a vacuum to print and make stuff in space. So, you could imagine you just take the titanium metal in powder form up. Well, one, you make the spaceships out of it, but two, you take it up there. You have these laser 3D printers in the vacuum of space, and you could just probably build components, build larger aircraft or build larger structures in space, just, printing in space. It could be amazing. And then on other planets and stuff like that. So there is, right now, there's quite a lot of use of titanium metal in it because it's lightweight, it's strong, it's corrosion resistant. If you're traveling 20 years to Mars or something like that, you don't want stuff to break down. Use titanium metal, it doesn't rust. It's an exciting.
Taso, you speak about manufacturing in space as if it's a matter of fact inevitability. I mean, how far away are we from seeing, some chips manufacturing and titanium trusses either on the moon or in some satellite?
I would hope it's in my lifetime. That would be pretty cool to go see. But I'm not smart enough to answer that question. But I would hope it's in my lifetime. We're seeing companies and we're seeing groups really invest in it. Obviously, what Elon's doing there, but also what Blue Origin's doing there, and there's a lot of interest in it. I would hope in the next 10, 15 years, we've made some great strides there. It's a longer term sort of endeavor, but it's very cool. And there's probably some things we can do up there and material testing that we can do up there, which would be really, really interesting compared to what we have, the limitations we have here on Earth.
So, Taso, we keep talking about the future, right? But you've been very successful so far in your career. You founded 2 companies, both publicly traded companies, nonetheless, right? You've dealt with bankers, you're making titanium. But what's one thing that you wish you would have known 15 years ago that you know today?
That's a good question. 15 years ago, I learned a lot about teams early on in my career, that you needed good people. So more about that. But I learned that early on in my career, so I can't complain there. Stress is a big thing. I'm much more relaxed now. Sometimes stuff happens that you don't want it to happen. Sometimes, I sort of give an example now. We're laying the tracks for where we want to go. And so the tracks aren't laid yet. So, you get on a train, say if you could get on a train from here where I'm sitting in Miami to LA, you know where you're going to go. You know where those tracks are going. But 15 years ago, I wish I knew that, you're laying those tracks and you're just going west. you're gonna hit a lake. You're gonna hit a mountain. You're gonna have to build a bridge. You're gonna have to build a tunnel. You're gonna have to go around it, and just take it all in stride and enjoy it. I was very serious when I was building my first companies, because when I was young and I was having to deal with people twice my age as an executive and stuff like that. And it was great. Built some great friendships there. But I was probably too stressed out for what I was doing. So I would say that stuff happens. You need to back yourself. You need to work hard, but you need to have a great team. But you need to sort of try and also enjoy it as well. Otherwise, you get yourself too stressed out, and you look back and you go, I should have never been that worried at that point in my life. So that's the only one I would, take care of yourself and your stress levels and your mental health. Because it's sometimes, just take it in stride, enjoy the moment as you're developing these things, because you'll look back and just laugh at some of the stuff that you thought, was all a disaster, but it ended up being all okay.
Oh man, I tell Luigi that all the time. Just relax, buddy. Have another drink. You'll be fine. It's going to work out for us. No, but all serious, me and Luigi have a motto. We know where we want to go. We don't know exactly what path's going to take us there, but we do know we're always going to head due north. Right? Because that's where we're going.
So Matt, I'm dying to ask Taso this one question for the last half hour. If you would bump into an old professor of yours from engineering school at the bar, and he's having a drink, you'd buy him a drink, and what would you say to him?
An old professor, like my professor of engineering, I saw him, probably around the time I was getting out of my first company, and I was just like, yeah, thanks.
Did you flick him the bird?
He was great. He was really, really good. I'll just tell him, it was really great in engineering school, because you would sort of lay the foundation of being interested in these things. And I was actually really lucky at the University of Western Australia, where the engineering professors made it fun, made it interesting, engineering. It was unfortunate that I worked a little bit in engineering, and I was like, I don't want to do this day in, day out. You're such a small cog in this big machine. You don't get to see the overall bigger picture ever. Seems like you're just going around in circles. But the professors made it engineering. It made it interesting. So you bump into your old professors and the people that you had worked for early on in your internships, it was. You just talk a little bit about what you're doing, the exciting stuff, but it was really early on laying those foundations of that interest in just understanding stuff. I guess you've got to have it in you a bit, but that interest that you get from engineering was really what's especially today with what we're doing with titanium metal. It's sort of like I'm back in university again. Actually, I'm back in university, because I talk to Professor Funk, who's one of the best metallurgical engineering professors on the planet, all the time, and it's like I'm doing a degree in material science or metallurgical engineering. So it's great. It's a lot of fun.
Tasso, it's got to be really rewarding to be in a field that has so much advancement to go. Like you're in uncharted waters. How do you wake up every morning not knowing where your day is going to lead you or where scientific developments will lead you, and just having this open mindset of, like Matt said before, we'll just figure this out?
Yeah, actually, we have that saying as well. We're just going to figure this stuff out, you know. Go west. Let's just figure it out. It's actually for us and for my team, and that's why it's important to have the team. Key people in my team have got that same mentality, because sometimes some people want to have the tracks laid, whereas we want to lay those tracks. We want to figure it out. We want to really figure out where we're going. You gotta focus on a day-to-day, on a short-term basis, and have short-term goals. But you need to be flexible, and you need to have a long-term vision. Let's get titanium into more products. How do we do that? I don't know. I mean, we'll figure it out. Like, is it going to be a wire DED or a wire powder DED, or is it going to be through this customer who's going to be first? Let's try to figure it out. Let's talk with people. So it's actually quite, for me and my team, it's really rewarding because we're explorers, right? We go and see. Like, I went to the F-35 production line in Fort Worth, Texas. We've gone and seen 3D printers. My team went and saw a company, Vulcan Forms, to see what they're doing. You know, some really advanced stuff. Let's go and talk with the automotive additive manufacturing people of the world. Let's go to talk to the machine makers for 3D printing. You know, let's really figure this out and move forward. It's just, if you have a great team and you have a vision and you know how to hit short-term goals while staying on that long-term vision, it's really rewarding waking up every day.
Tasso, by analogy, I want to ask you a very humble question. So we had a president years ago, Herbert Hoover. He made a fortune in Western Australia, also in natural resources. And obviously he had a very successful career in politics and in economics. And on his deathbed, he looks back in his life and he said, my greatest accomplishment was after World War I, he went back to Europe and organized soup kitchens and all sorts of fundraisings for all the peoples that were stricken after World War I. So this is a guy that had wild success. And in the twilight of his career, he looks back with fondness of all the people he helped. Now, you're still a young buck, but tombstone moment. When you look back, what do you want to be known for?
I think, making the world a better place, I guess, but also improving some of the people's lives that we've had a chance to, interact with. It's, I've already seen some of that, where people have talked to me and said, you helped change my life with some of the investments that people have made with us. I've had that quite often. Actually, I was at a conference 2 days ago in New York City. I went straight into that conference, walked straight out of the elevator into the room. And before I had a chance to walk over and register, there's a guy that turned to me and said, I wanted to speak with you because in 2018 or 2017, when I was at this conference once, he said I was just a young lawyer. I was one of like 3 people in the room. You were presenting Piedmont Lithium. And I came and talked to you. We talked for a little bit, and then I went out and bought the stock, and then I sold it not long ago, and it paid for my wife's engagement ring. And it's like, oh, that is really, really cool, So you have that where people, you give people jobs or give people a good start in their career, and hopefully they stay with us, or they go off and do amazing things, or give them, we take on a lot of interns. We do a lot of stuff with our communities where we operate, where we're supporting a lot of the young generation. We've got a titanium mineral resource in West Tennessee, and it's an area which has been impoverished, lost a lot of jobs because of the shuttering of a coal-fired power generation facility out there. And trying to give, we actually got a book, me and my VP of Geology just wrote for the young kids to sort of try and help them see that there's future in these really exciting industries which are going to be being developed in the US over the next 10, 15 years. So I think for me, it's really that is a big thing for us in that, helping, not just people that invest in our companies, but the communities that we're helping to support to build our company, seeing, the young ones from there have, not need, especially in these areas, we try and locate our facilities in areas which need our business. We don't need to build our pilot facility, our new facility outside Boston where everybody else is building it. That's fine if you need to build it there. But we chose our titanium demonstration facility to be in an area, South Boston, Virginia, which needs the jobs. Saw a lot of jobs go away from that region because of the tobacco industry, essentially imploding. So being able to help the communities, give opportunities to the young children in these communities to work into something, to have careers, all this stuff is we've already seen it in some of what we do. It's really rewarding as well.
So Taso, you've done so much, right? What's really cool about your story is you actually go out and you're making things. You're literally taking something from the ground and turning it into something else, which is awesome, right? Can you tell the audience where they can find IperionX? What's the best way to look into the company, where you're traded, and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're NASDAQ traded. So IPX, I for Indigo, P for Peter, X for Xavier is the ticker. And then just go to our website, IperionX.com, IperionX.com, and you can find out a lot more information. Then we do have on Twitter, it's just IPX on Twitter as well, and the other social media channels. I'm not a big social media person. I'm not that great at it. I don't even have Instagram or anything. I have LinkedIn. I hardly know how to use it. So, but I think it's an important medium for the younger generation to be able to see news, and we're constantly updating stuff. We actually have TikTok as well, so, which is quite funny.
Those got to be some cool TikToks to see what you're making. I would actually sit there and watch that.
We have a TikTok where we've made, we binder jetted printed some parts. And you see what we're doing out in West Tennessee. It's actually pretty cool. And as we make more and more of these parts, we'll definitely be TikToking them, I guess.
So Taso, we want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for being here. But before I do let you go, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
What's the coolest thing to you that you think you've made out of titanium?
The coolest thing that we've made out of titanium. Okay. Yeah, I think we're working on something which is a very cool structural component that just without the 3D printing is not being able to be made. It's like a bracket, which doesn't sound cool, but instead of just being a normal bracket, it's like a very cool not ergonomically, the design looks like bones, and it's been optimized by like an AutoCAD, by AutoCAD's 3D sort of printing software, where it optimizes for strength and all that. So instead of needing a big bulky bracket, it's been optimized like bones to sort of be strong and lightweight because it's got less material, and you just wouldn't be able to make it without without 3D printing, and you wouldn't be able to make it cheap without our powder as well. So that's very cool.
Awesome. Taso, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, that's a wrap of the Liquid Launch Project.
Thank you for listening to the show, and make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Launch Project.